everybody. Thank you for joining us. And man, oh man, do we have some things to talk about today. Israel, the IDF, and Rafah, the Biden administration saying you're not going to get any more ammunition from us. You know, what in the world is going on with that? We have this claim that if you state that the Jews were responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus, it's now anti-Semitism. That's an HB 6090. We have comments from Tucker Carlson. We have the America's role and what's going on right now with the with what's going on in Israel. We have so many different things I want to talk about with you guys today. But I brought on today. Joining us is my wonderful friend John Haller. John, thanks for joining us.
Always good to be with you, Tom. It's been a while.
It's been 4 weeks, I believe, and man, the last 3 weeks, all I've heard from people are comments. Where's John Haller? Don't you talk to John anymore? What's going on with John? So it's great to have you back.
I was in timeout, right?
No, you weren't in timeout.
I know I wasn't.
No, that was not it at all. No, my schedule has changed. You know, I've explained to you. My schedule's changed. I have a couple of new programs that have started. I've had to make some adjustments, and I'm just trying to keep everything going. But just so you know, everybody, we'll get John and myself back on a more regular basis. I just have a few weeks of juggling things to figure out things and keep my sanity. And then John and I are eventually going golfing together too. But all right, John, we have so much to talk about. People don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from you. So I'm going to show a short video. And this is IDF praying, blowing the shofar before they go into Rafah. And let's roll this short video. John, you look at that, you know, my mind goes back to the time of Jericho, Israel marching around the walls of Jericho 7 times, and they sound the shofar and the walls come down. But you look at this, man, there's so much world pressure against Israel to not go into Rafah. We look what's happening, and Israel, I believe, has to finish this job. And I believe the U.S. doesn't want them to finish the job. But let's start from here and just start. We have so much to talk about. Let's roll.
The U.S. government doesn't want them to finish the job.
Yeah, let's put it that way.
The U.S. government wants to get rid of Netanyahu. The U.S. government wants to interfere in the democratically run elections of Israel. The same government that complains about interference in our elections. And this has been, Tom, and you know this as well as anyone, under the first 2 Obama administrations, there were concerted efforts made against Netanyahu. And I'm not saying that Netanyahu is the only guy who can lead Israel. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. But they had an election, and the election was fairly conducted. Everybody got to vote. The count was correct. Netanyahu made a coalition with some ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox parties and took control of the government at a level that nobody's controlled the government for a number of years. He's tried to do a couple of things that I'm in full support of. I follow Caroline Glick and hope to hopefully keep your fingers crossed. I hope to be interviewing her soon. But the judicial reform. I mean, I have friends in Israel that think I'm crazy for supporting judicial reform, but it's completely out of control. It's undemocratic. And there's a parallel. They're doing this, whether you like Trump or not, or whether you like Netanyahu or not, is not the issue. It's the undemocratically elected people who are weaponizing the judicial system against the properly elected leader of the country in an improper fashion. And they do need control. The left wing controls the Israeli judiciary, and it's undemocratic. And so I'm tired of the self-righteous yahoos in Washington telling us about, respecting fair elections, and everywhere they go. And there's a place in South America that had an election that was, in my view, corrupt recently. And now they've gone after the guy who they say lost. And I know a bit about that. We have a mutual friend who's very close to that situation. So I don't really want to go into it. But so now Israel's at war. Okay, they were attacked on October 7th. I don't see anybody talking about that. By the way, I believe that today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, Memorial Day, and they did play the siren, sounded the siren in Israel, and people had very interesting reactions to it. Like, boy, it really reminded me of the siren today and the sirens we heard on October 7th. But Israel was attacked, and I believe the Israeli government is going to be releasing, starting today or tomorrow, interviews of people who were hostages under Hamas. And they're just going to release them unedited, I believe, to the public. People need to go get the videos. They're all over the place. You can find them. You're not going to find them on any mainstream news source in the United States of what actually happened on October 7th. It was horrific. So Israel had to take care of the problem. And I see these people, Jew-hating people, all over the internet, all over Twitter, posting, oh, Israel's committing genocide, blah, 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 baloney. It's not genocide. There's not a reasonable person on the earth that understands the definition of genocide that thinks that what's going on in Gaza right now is a genocide. Israel has to finish the job. And nobody ever says, so what I post on Twitter now when I see these posts is, okay, Hamas surrender, free the hostages. Then maybe you have an argument. But this is a very complex thing that they're going to have to do. And they have to, I think, take over what's called the Philadelphia Corridor, which is the connection between Egypt and Gaza. And everybody should know the Egypt-Gaza border is fortified way beyond whatever the Israel-Gaza border was fortified. They don't want these people. How many? And I think there was a vote recently at the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries. Do you want to take Palestinian refugees? And I think it was, so there's 57 countries, and I believe the vote was 46 said no, and 11 said absolutely no way.
That's the reality. Okay. And the Biden administration is saying, hey, let's bring over 800,000 Palestinians here. Jordan doesn't want them. Egypt doesn't want them. We look at all of these different dynamics that are taking place, and we have another mutual friend over there in Israel also who was saying, here's the truth of it. Israel is this vassal state of the United States just being manipulated however the U.S. wants. And now, you notice that it came out about 2 months ago that it was said that the U.S., I don't know if it was Department of Defense or whatever it was, said every nation now that is receiving weapons or ammunition from the U.S. has 45 days to prove how they're going to use these weapons. I don't know if they say humanely or whatever it was. So here we are, we're about 60 days past when that was released, and we have this report. It's been all over the news since this morning and over the weekend. Biden administration halts ammunition shipment to Israel. And why did they really halt the shipment to Israel? Biden administration is still verbally saying we're supporting Israel, but there's reasons why we aren't shipping these things to Israel right now. The warnings are there. They've already threatened Israel. They don't want them going into Rafah. And Caroline Glick, your friend, has said many times that Israel needs to develop their own ammunition and their own weapons. So this is, you're looking at this going, the U.S. administration, like you said, it's the U.S. government. It's not the U.S. people that are against Israel. There are those on the right and the left. We'll get into that, the Tucker Carlsons and others. But there's a Harvard poll. Did you see this the other day, released? It was done a couple weeks ago. It was a Harvard-Harris poll. 80% of Americans polled are in support of Israel in their operations against Hamas. 80%. That's not making mainstream news because they don't want to report it. The Biden administration doesn't want that going out. I'm sure that Harvard, when they did that poll, they were thinking it's going to support all of their insane things that are taking place at these schools, but it came back. 80%. That is really something. Newsmax reported on that. They're the only ones that seem to want to talk about it.
I know we live in a time of extreme propaganda, but this is beyond anything that I thought I would ever see, to be honest, Tom. I'm very troubled by it. And again, and I think Caroline and Melanie Phillips and others, Jonathan Tobin, Gadi Taub, and all these guys who talk about this, Michael Duran, who analyzed this, Richard Goldberg at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Lee Smith at Tablet Magazine, and others. There's a big misconception about the Memorandum of Understanding, which my recollection is it's a 10-year-long agreement. It allows, we give about $3.5 billion a year to Israel, but it's not like we give them $3.5 billion and you can do with it whatever you want. There are severe restrictions on it. They have to buy weapons from us. Because they're buying weapons from us, we want to protect our defense industry. So we say, well, you can't produce the stuff. You have to buy it from us exclusively. And now we're cutting them off when they're trying to go into Rafah to finish the job. I'm really concerned about this. I mean, Tom, I look at this. I think we did a panel with a bunch of us, you and me and Britt and I think Pete Garcia, Britt Gillette and Pete Garcia, I guess it's been about a month ago now, about a coming war in the North. I look at it from I know there's the God factor in all of this. I'm not unaware of that. I know the prophetic scriptures and that type of thing. I'm just sort of looking at it as the unbiased analyst of what's going on. And I'm troubled by what I see. I see Israel facing and I think they're going to prevail, but on a purely human level, it looks to be an impossible situation. There was an interview the other day. Now, I always forget where this interview is. I played a clip of it in my update yesterday. There's a lady who's it's on my Facebook page. She's an analyst. She was in the IDF, lieutenant colonel in the government for a while. And she was talking about the war in the North. I mean, nobody's talking about this. And her analysis was, and I've interviewed a couple people from Alma Research, which everybody should follow if you're concerned about this, Israel-alma.org. Avraham Levine, who lives up in the Golan, a couple times, and he said literally thousands of homes in northern Israel and southern Lebanon have been destroyed. The Al-Manar website, which everybody can access, it's a Hezbollah website, publishes. Did you lose me?
Hello?
Yeah,
okay. I can hear you again. Okay.
Can you hear me again?
I can hear you again. Yep. I think it was just our end.
Okay. So in the north, there have been hundreds of villages, buildings, whatever, destroyed on both sides of the border in Lebanon and Israel. Al-Manar website, a Hezbollah website, publishes pictures, and so they're getting up close to 400 Hezbollah operatives, soldiers that have been killed since October the 7th. Nobody talks about this. Whatever the tunnel system is in Gaza, they think is many times worse and more embedded in southern Lebanon. There are at least 80,000 people who are not living in the north. They've evacuated. They're living in hotels all over Israel. I mean, I was thinking about going, and it was hard to find a hotel in some places. Nobody's going there for tourism, but the hotels are filled with people from Israel, from the south, from the north. Over 125,000 people right now are not living at home. That's a small country. That's a major city. Kiryat Shimona, 25,000 people completely evacuated. And there's this low-level war going on in the north. But how does Israel deal with tunnels embedded in bedrock that are worse than the ones down in Gaza? And they haven't dealt with the ones in Gaza. Yeah, and now they got to go into Rafah. I just don't know. When you stack it up on a purely human level, it seems to be an almost impossible situation.
I would agree. And I think we do know the God factor. God is going to be glorified. He's going to rescue them. But John, let me ask you this. I interviewed a gentleman. He was an ambassador to the UN, Israeli, Yoram Edinger. Are you familiar with him?
Okay. I'm very familiar with him.
So it was probably 2015, 16, somewhere in there when I did the interview with him. And he was talking about the money that the U.S. gives to Israel. And he goes, and the left was complaining about it back then. Now we have the left and right complaining about it. And he said what people don't realize is that the U.S. doesn't have to put an aircraft carrier over there in a whole group. Because if the U.S. doesn't have Israel over there, then all hell can break out at any time. And he said, plus, the U.S. gives the money to Israel. Israel has to use the money to buy back weapons from the U.S. So it's like, well, you can have our money, but you got to use the money and give it back to us. So you look at it and you go, well, wait a minute. So all these people that are shouting, the Candace Owens, Tucker Carlsons, and all of the other people I see on the right that are now shouting about Israel getting all this money from the U.S., let's just cut them off. It's like not thinking through the whole process.
No. It's not that they're not thinking through it. They're willfully ignorant in what they really feel about Israel and Jews as being exposed right in front of our eyes.
So they'd rather just see that.
I think it's time to take the gloves off and call them what they are. That's my personal opinion.
Well, let's do that. In fact, we're going to take the gloves off for the rest of the program. So with that, we see what's coming from the people on the right. This anti-Semitism bill coming out of Congress. Let's start there. And then I want to roll over to Tucker Carlson. And then we're going to get into this brand new COVID vaccine thing later on. We'll get into that later. But right now, let's just...
So let's talk about H.R. 6090. It's a bill that was passed by the U.S. House of Representatives, and it had bipartisan support. There were a number of people that voted against it. Jewish people, Gerald Nadler, who I'm no fan of, voted against it. And look, I'm all for free speech. Okay, you're allowed to be an idiot. You're allowed to be a Jew-hating idiot in America and say what you want to say. I get that. You're not allowed to occupy a building. You're not allowed to commit assaults. You're not by the way, blocking traffic, blocking roads, blocking access, that is an assault under legal definition. And if we had prosecutors that had the desire to prosecute these people, they could do it. Just like they prosecute people who sit in a hallway near an abortion clinic. So don't tell me that they can't do anything about it. This is a concerted government-wide effort to denigrate Israel and to allow this anarchy to take place. I don't know if you saw it. I called my update yesterday, welcome to say what to stand, because these Soros-funded people, okay, Soros and all these other left-wing organizations, the same ones that are funding election areas in the election, they're funding these campus groups. And did you see the list of demands that the campus group came out with? Well, we need helmets, we need strobes, we need flashlights, we need zip ties.
We need water, we need food.
No bagels. No bagels.
Oh,
no, we want vegan food. And it says, we want hot lunches. And then in all caps, it said, important, 3 exclamation points.
So you know what they ought to do is take away their cell phones too, because most of that tech comes from, or much of that tech comes from these Israeli companies. So
So if you want to really, that's what they said too, is the list of demands. All demands on here, all donations must be BDS compliant. Please check our app. And then they said, it should say the boycott app. They said boy cat app in the way they typed it in their documents. So you can tell they're really well educated.
Let me show you this and then pick up from here, because it just speaks volumes to this. So the CEO of some corporation called Hims and Hers, whatever that is, the CEO offered jobs to pro-Hamas protesters, and then his stock began to tank. Imagine that. Lost $210 million in stock value. I look at that and go, yeah. So anyways, continuing with this nonsense stuff.
I mean, it goes on. By the way, the Soros funding is now pretty much controlled by his 38-year-old son, Alexander Soros. And Alexander Soros has a new romantic interest, by the way. Did you see this? It was in the New York Post.
I did not see this.
They made their public debut at the Met Gala in New York over the weekend. His romantic interest, it's a female, by the way, but still married. It's the still wife of the disgraced Congressman Anthony Weiner, the Saudi Arabian spawn of Muslim Brotherhood parents from Saudi Arabia, Huma Abedin, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign manager in 2016.
No way. So that's his new girlfriend.
Yep. They've been, since they sort of went public on Valentine's Day, and then they went to the Met Gala this last weekend. Very happy couple, but she's still married.
That's a match made in hell. That's like perfect.
I know. It was sort of like, if these people don't want us to point these things out, then they don't do them. That would be a good solution.
Yeah, if they don't hear about these things either, then don't watch.
Yeah. So she's like the Muslim soul of Hillary Clinton is now dating Alexander Soros.
That's. Oh, speaking of Hillary.
Well, it was what you would say. You can't make this stuff up, right?
Yeah, no kidding. The wicked witch of the West.
Yeah, who had Alexander Soros dating a Muslim Brotherhood spawn on their end times bingo card?
Yeah, no kidding. Huma Abedin. I didn't. I wish I did. Or maybe you can win money doing this kind of stuff. Okay. So back to this anti-Semitism bill.
Okay, so the anti-Semitism bill, 6090. So look, I'm against anti-Semitism. We know where it ends up, right? And so the tension in America is between regulating speech, which I'm against under the Constitution of the United States, but also really trying to clamp down on bad ideas. The problem with the bad ideas here is they lead to violence, and they led to what happened in Germany back in the 30s. And when we're on Holocaust Remembrance Day, it's like, maybe we got to really think about this. And so it's a concerted, it's like a whole of government, whole of student government, whole of student body thing. But they're even arresting these people, like at UCLA or Cal Berkeley or wherever, and they're finding out like 80-90% of them aren't even students there. And if you've seen their encampments, like at Columbia and Harvard and other places, they all have the same tent.
$500 tents.
And they're all the same color.
Yeah,
I'm almost getting the impression that somebody's behind this, funding it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what kind of discount you get. I had like 10,000 green tents. So I'm against anti-Semitism, and I agree with the sentiment expressed in the bill, but not so much the way that it went. So the bill gets passed, and immediately, a lot of people on the right, and there's a. And look, Megyn Kelly sees it. I see it. A bunch of other people. Mark Levin sees it. There's a growing anti-Semitic streak that's being expressed very strongly on the right. And so immediately they say, "Oh, I don't even know if you can find their names. They're conservative organizations that they run that are very political, and they say." It appears that the Bible's now been made illegal in the United States. Listen, nobody who can read English and read this bill should be able to say that. So when they say that the Bible's now made illegal under this act, there's an agenda behind what they're saying. They're coming out with their true feelings about Jews in Israel. I don't know how else to say this.
Okay. Well,
and it's people on the right that we may love and support, but I'm just telling you, one Twitter guy posted it. He posted a passage from the Bible, because what the statute does, it drags in the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism. It incorporates it by reference. So a lot of people get upset and say, well, they shouldn't have done that. Congress should have come up with their own. Well, this is the one that Congress came up with. They just adopted what somebody else had already written. And they also, though, incorporated within the definition of anti-Semitism in the bill, the IHRA, that's the Holocaust Remembrance Association standards or examples of what's anti-Semitic. So one of them would be drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. I see that on the right all the time. I mean, listen, so you go watch War Room, Bannon's War Room. Caroline Glick is on. Read the comments, Tom. It is unbelievable Jew hatred expressed in the comments. It's like everybody commenting is Rick Wiles or Mike Adams from Natural News.
Yeah. Well, okay, let me ask you a few questions, because last night on my update, I'm in Daniel chapter 12, I talked about this bill, and I said it's very problematic. I quoted Matt Gaetz, who voted against it, and rightly so. I think it's a terrible thing I think it's foolish. Because when I look at the Bible, you look at the New Testament, clearly you have a deal made between Judas and the Jewish religious leaders, not the common people, but the religious leaders. You have Caiaphas involved, and Jesus is turned over to the Romans. You go to the book of Acts, Peter and John call out the Jewish leaders and say, you crucified
They call out
Christ.
the leaders who happen to be Jews.
Right, and okay,
but
now
they call out the leaders and the Romans both.
Yeah, so let's I think that would be good to make this separation of understanding. There is a problem, because when you look at it, if you quote certain things according to the way the bill is written, the way I read it, you do have an issue with free speech. The growing problem I see is that we have the leaders, the George Soros and now Alex Soros. We have you can look at certain people that are at the top of companies. Soros is obviously he's a Jew, but he seems to go after the common Jews, the regular Jews.
Right.
Mayor Rothschilds did this. You have certain people in, Anthony Blinken's Jewish, and you look at some of the things that he's doing. You know, so
you
when
have
you
the
see
whole crazy, you have the whole crazy left in Israel that does it.
okay, so you
Even
have them at
Barack
the
and those guys.
Well, I think it's good to work through this because you have people at the top. Karl Marx was a Jew. So what? The problem is it's cherry picking certain Jews that are maybe the ones in charge of things in Hollywood or whatever, right? They take them and they blanket all Jews are bad, and you have this major anti-Semitism that is in play, and people are listening to it.
But Tom, the problem is that the expression, okay, cherry picking certain verses where Paul may have said, "In your leaders crucified Jesus." First of all, let me just say this from my perspective. If Jesus didn't die on the cross, we are in big, big trouble, right? Theologically.
Absolutely correct.
And does it not say in Isaiah 53 and also in the Psalms that it pleased God to crush him?
Yeah, it also says, this is interesting, in Romans 11, that I believe it's Romans 11, might be Romans 9, I think it's Romans 11, that if it wasn't for the Jews not receiving Yeshua, you would have no hope as a Gentile. There'd be no hope for you.
Right. And so Jesus had to die. I mean, that's right. The thing. But so when all of these so-called Christians are running around, like Candace Owens, so let's just use her as an example. Whenever this comes up, she's now tweeting, "Christ is King, Christ is King." By the way, she just converted to Roman Catholicism.
Yeah,
that's probably a whole show right there to talk about that problem and what that leads to. And so, Tom, I understand the concern, but I'm telling you, I've read the statute. There is nothing in the statute that creates a penalty for anything. It gives, and this is another reason why I think the statute is unconstitutional. First of all, it's an infringement on speech. But it also, there's a series of cases in front of the Supreme Court. I'm hopeful for a decision by the end of June that will really undermine what's been going on in Washington now since the Eisenhower administration. Congress passes a law and they say, okay, now you bureaucrats you write regulations to implement our belief as to what should happen. I believe the Supreme Court, there's a very good chance the Supreme Court could say that's unconstitutional. Let's look at an example of that. Under the EPA laws, they had a concept called navigable waters of the United States. And we've seen the ridiculous nature of how that's been regulated by the EPA. For example, there's a farmer in Idaho that was trying to clean up the vegetation around a drainage ditch on his property. He's now being bankrupted with tens of millions of dollars of fines for interrupting the flow, maybe interrupting the flow of a navigable water of the United States. So that's unconstitutional. I think the Supreme Court is going to say that, but this is exactly what this bill does. This bill says, okay, Secretary of Education and Secretary of State and people who are involved in civil rights, put something together to implement that this might be a violation of someone's civil rights. Okay, so there's no penalty. So when I see all these conservatives saying, oh, they've shut down sharing the gospel. Well, one, no, they have not. That's fact number one. Fact number two, if they do share the gospel anyway, right?
Absolutely.
Haven't Christians been doing that for almost 2,000 years?
I mean, why would you not share it? Here's which is another case in point. When you go to Israel, there's a lot of, I mean, we see this coming from the right all the time, and those who claim to be Christian saying, well, when you go to Israel, you can't share the gospel in Israel. It's against the law. You can't evangelize, proselytize, or whatever. Heard it a lot over the last year. Well, guess what? I mean, you look at every tourist place you go to. You walk through the old city. Guess what everything is about? So what we hear in the Western media is problematic. So I get what you're saying, but I'm curious. So then the attempt of this then is to make it. It's just leading into anti-Semitism, is what you're really saying with this bill.
Yeah, the way that the reaction has been is to foment more anti-Semitism.
I get it.
By the people on the right. Oh, they're shutting us down, They're not. They're not doing that. There may be regulations that come, but even Tablet Magazine, the editorial board of Tablet Magazine, which is a conservative Jewish publication, highly recommend that you follow it. They say, look, we don't want this done. As soon as the heavy hand of the government enters the game, it can easily turn into a fist. So I agree with them that this law is a bad law. I agree with you that this is a bad law. It's stupid. It's overbroad. It's all of these things. However, I think as Christians, we have to be accurate in the way we portray something. So running around and getting our pastor friend Jack says panties in a bunch about that they're shutting down sharing the gospel. That's just not what this bill does right now. It could lead to that. I think it's a bad bill, but it's not doing that right now. And even if it does, go share the gospel anyway.
Go share the gospel anyway, just like you do in Israel. I've never worried about being arrested in Israel because they share Jesus with someone, and everywhere you go, you're kind of expected to.
But the way it's being touted throughout the conservative media, Twitter, and all this stuff, is to foment anti-Semitism itself. I think.
No, I totally get what you're saying now. I appreciate that quite a bit. So with that, you said Mather and some others, Jewish people that you know they voted against it. Is there
Gerald Nadler and at least 3 other Democrats who are Jewish?
Okay, so they voted against it because of that reason, you think, or do we know?
Yeah, I think that they thought it was overbroad and that type of thing. Sure.
Okay, all right. Let's move from that. I want to ask you about this, and then in a few minutes we're going to go over to. Let's make it in about 2 minutes. We're going to go over live to the app-only exclusive because John has a few more things I'm gonna let him go off on that we can't necessarily say. So you guys can all see the countdown, right? Everybody watching, you can see you got 1 minute and 53 seconds. It'll be off of here and going over. But let's start here because we're going to get into. Well, I can't even say it here, but right now I can say Tucker Carlson. Let's start here. So
let's start with Tucker.
Let's go there, Tucker.
Listen, Dumasami Washington, who used to be with Christians United for Israel. He's got his own organization now. Black pastor from the Bay Area, by the way, very pro-Israel. Follow him on Twitter, Dumasami Washington. And I interviewed him a couple weeks ago, 30 minutes, unusual length of time for a John Haller interview. I know that, but
yeah, very.
But we talked about it. He wrote an article with someone else at Tablet Magazine again called "The Arsonist," how Tucker Carlson is taking a torch to Christian evangelical relations. And what Tucker did was exactly right. Now, I've been told by people who worked at Fox that did you ever notice, John, sort of in the Socratic method, you get people to learn by asking questions. Did you ever notice that Israel was never portrayed, or if it was portrayed at all, was never portrayed in a positive light from 8 to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday Eastern time on Fox?
Hey, let me mention this before we switch over, because we're going to switch over in 25 seconds. So you're talking, how he took a torch to evangelical and Jewish relations. Is that what it was?
Yeah, there's a lot of us that have been trying to restore that for like decades,
right?
Because of the Martin Luther type anti-Semitism that was existed in the Christian church for centuries.
We got 5 seconds left. Listen, everybody, hopeforourtimes.com is the website. App is the same. Go there right now. Okay, go on over.